I just wanted to make sure that you're able to see the screen. All right. So, by the way of introduction, I am Gaurav Mahindra, an AWS solution architect specializing in the migration modernization of customer workloads in both data centers and cloud environments. In today's session, we will examine how customers can optimize the transfer and storage of media files by leveraging various AWS services. Okay, so any customer media dynamics, or as we call it as AMD, is a media production company specializing in the creation of video streaming content and films. With a global presence in Europe, Asia, and North America, they boast a diverse team of videographers, editors, and production staff that facilitates real-time collaboration across continents. Their business goals focus on enhancing production efficiency by streamlining workflows to reduce the time from content creation to distribution. They aim to improve file management through a centralized, scalable system designed for large media files. Additionally, they are also committed to adapting to market demands by responding swiftly with agile content production strategies. Their technological landscape features an on-premise compute and storage system, providing them with flexibility and scalability and control over critical media assets. On-premise systems that they have is the dedicated servers and workstations to meet high performance and computing needs for video editing, rendering, and processing large files. Um, they also have they also leverage network attached storage and storage area network, ensuring rapid access to frequently used media files. Now, the challenges that include, and when we started talking to this particular customer, included data synchronization, as managing consistency can be complex, right? Especially with frequently updated large media files across the continents. Additionally, the current setup was also resulting in slower transfer speeds when moving these files between on-premise storage systems, which impacts workflow efficiency. And finally, they face ongoing cost management challenges because they are running on-prem environment and they've got dedicated servers, which is basically depreciating assets for them. So that's about the overview about our any customer media dynamics. So let's look at the solution, and to address the challenges such as data synchronization, file transfer speeds, and cost management. AMD implemented several solutions through AWS. First, they enabled S3 transfer acceleration to enhance file transfer speeds across global teams by utilizing Amazon's global network of edge locations, or what we call it as CloudFront location, which optimized data transfer to S3 buckets and reduced upload and download times. They deployed AWS S3 file gateway at their on-premise location, allowing the team to access S3 files as if they were local, which basically facilitated seamless uploads and retrievals through standard file protocols like NFS and SMB. Additionally, AWS Data Sync was also leveraged or was also configured to automate and accelerate file transfer between on-premise systems and Amazon S3, ensuring that media files were regularly synchronized without complex scripting. Finally, they also utilized S3 multi-part upload and download to efficiently manage large media files by breaking them into smaller parts for faster and parallel uploads and downloads, thereby enhancing transfer reliability. Any questions that anyone has so far? Kamala, I won't be able to see the chat, so I was just wondering if there are any questions on the chat. Please feel free to bring that up.
Sure, Gaurav. I don't see any questions so far, but maybe a question to the group. Like, do you have any scenario similar to what Gaurav is presenting today? What brings you to this meeting today? You feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself and share it. Let's make it interactive as we go through this. Yeah, for now, I don't see any questions.
So I'm going to move on. Okay, so now let's look at, we did talk about several solution components. So let's first look at Amazon S3 File Gateway and how it works. So basically, Amazon S3 File Gateway provides a seamless integration between on-premise environment and Amazon S3, or what we call it as Amazon Simple Storage Service. It enables you to access S3 storage via standard file protocols like NFS and SMB, allowing you to store and retrieve files easily. The gateway also caches frequently accessed data locally for low latency access while asynchronously uploading data to S3. So to configure Amazon S3 file gateway, you would deploy it as a virtual appliance on-prem and then create an S3 bucket in the AWS Management Console. Then you associate that S3 file gateway with the bucket and set up NFS or SMB file shares for local access. Finally, you can mount these shares on your servers to enable seamless file operations with S3 storage. Okay, so next, I would also like to discuss the AWS Data Sync and how it works. Amazon Data Sync simplifies data transfer between on-premise storage and AWS services like Amazon S3, FSx, and EFS. It automates and accelerates the movement of large data sets, handling tasks like data validation and encryption during transfer. So with the built-in scheduling and monitoring, Data Sync also ensures that there is an efficient and a secure data migration with minimal operational overhead. So basically, gone are those days, when administrators would create a script, create an error logic within the scripts and things like that. To configure Amazon Data Sync, you begin by creating a data sync agent in the AWS Management Console, which can again be deployed as a virtual machine in your on-premise environment. After deploying the agent, we specify the source location such as on-premise NFS or an SMB storage, and then the destination locations, which could be Amazon S3, FSx, or EFS. Once those location source and target locations are created, you create a data sync task that links the source and the destination. And basically, it helps you validate or set up options for data validation and encryption to ensure secure transfers. Finally, you can monitor the task progress and performance through AWS Management Console, adjusting configurations as needed for efficiency. And today, after this presentation, we are also going to jump into AWS Management Console, and I am going to showcase how these services are being leveraged by the customer. So, so this basically the solution entails the following workflow, right? So you've got the upload workflow where media teams across Europe, Asia, and the US start by recording raw videos footage. They use S3 file gateway to save the footage locally, which then in turn sync to S3 in the background. For teams preferring direct uploads, as in-house tool integrates with S3 multi-part upload to enhance the speed from remote location. S3 transfer acceleration is also enabled on that S3 bucket, which essentially uses the CloudFront locations, or what we call it as edge locations. Then the second step is synchronization with data sync. So data sync is also configured to regularly monitor the local network attached storage or the storage area network storage for new media content. This ensures that the files are automatically synced to the S3 bucket, either at a specified interval or on demand. So basically, you can run data sync tasks on demand, or you can establish a schedule for it. When editing, so we are talking about the download workflow now. So when editing team need access to raw footage or archived media files, they utilize the S3 multi-part download for quick retrieval of large files. Alternatively, they can also access these files directly through the S3 file gateway for seamless integration. Next slide I'm going to share is basically talking about the architecture that the customer has in play. So if you look at it, and before we even transition to the AWS Management Console for the demo, I just want to discuss this demo architecture. So this setup features an on-premise architecture with an application server that hosts shared folder and files. So let me bring my laser pointer and then So we are talking about this application server, which is basically hosting a shared folder and files. Now the data is synchronized to an S3 bucket using data sync, which is this part, right? Then the bucket also has S3 transfer acceleration enabled, which basically utilizes the CloudFront locations for low latency. And then finally, we also have the S3 file gateway configured, which basically allows global teams to access S3 files as if they were local. And then, they also are cached. Frequently used files are also cached, thereby, facilitating seamless uploads and retrievals through standard protocols like NFS and SMB. Vimala, are there any questions before we jump into the AWS Management Console?
No questions in the chat. I was asking the group if they are aware of data sync service or has used it before as you jump into the console. I didn't see any response, so assuming that it's new to everyone.
All right, so with that said, I am going to get onto the AWS Management Console. All right. So we begin by, like I was saying, we do have an EC2 instance that I created, which is basically an SQL server, and it has a shared folder. I'm going to log on to this. So the server name is called Core SQL 01. And then if you will see that it actually has a shared folder on the D drive that stores all of this information, right? So you might have certain files, folders, and whatnot within these uh, different folders. So this is where your EC2 instance comes into play. So that's just the step one, where you have an on-premise application server that has an SMB, a shared folder and files, right? Then we are going to move on to setting up the data sync. So if you look here, so it takes a couple of minutes for all of these components to be created. So I took an opportunity to create certain things before this session, because we've got limited time. But of course, as at AWS, we are available to assist if your customers have any needs around this, and you can certainly get in touch with us. So the next step is to establish the data sync for an online synchronization of these shared file systems to an S3 bucket. So what you'll see is that the first step of creating, so when you land on the data sync page, you'll see this option as getting started. And if you click on the dropdown, you get three options where it says between on-premise storage and AWS, between other clouds and AWS, and then between AWS storage services. So essentially, these are the use cases for data sync. So in our case, we are moving the data between on-premise storage and AWS, and I'll click on Get Started. Then the first step is to deploy the data sync agent. As part of this demo, I have already staged the data sync agent, but essentially you can download the image depending on the type of hypervisor you have. So you might have a VMware ESXi, you might have an Hyper-V, or you have a kernel-based virtual machine. Now, in our case, I have deployed it using Amazon EC2, and this is what my data sync agent is. So basically, it runs Linux, and this is the agent that connects to the source location and the target location and does the synchronization between your on-prem storage and S3. I'm going to hit cancel on this. So the next step is to create a task. I already pre-staged the task, but I'll show you how would you go about creating a task. So you click on create task, you define an existing location, or you can create a new location. You can select the location type. So it could be an EFS file system, it could be FSX, S3, it could be NFS, it could be object storage, or it could be server message block, which we refer as SMB. In our case, we are utilizing SMB. I'm going to select my agent. I am going to provide the IP address of my SMB server. So basically the IP address of Core SQL 01. I'm going to copy this. My screen is shared. If I am not mistaken, I am going to quickly check the name of my shared folder. It's called shared one. Okay. So shared on. I will provide my credentials. Basically, these are the credentials that should have at least at minimum read access to that share. The domain information, I click on next. Next, I'm creating a destination location, right? So I want this to go to S3, right? So I'm going to select S3. And then I can, if you already have an S3 bucket created, you can click on browse S3, and I already pre-staged it. So I'm going to click on share data sync. That's the name of my S3 bucket. It is, I can define the storage class, whether I want it standard, intelligent hearing, standard I. Of course, there are differences, and whatever fits your use case, you should be selecting the storage class accordingly. I'm going to use standard for now, and then it's going to create a service link role so that it can move, data sync can move the data from your on-prem environment to S3. I'm going to hit next. I'm going to provide a name. Let's say data sync 02 task. Now I define the source data option. So contents to scan, I'm going to select everything, but then, let's say there are certain folders on-prem that you would want to exclude, then you can just say specific files and folders, and then you can put the filters and things like that. You can also provide an XML file, or what we call it as manifest. In our use case today or demo, I'm going to just select everything. I can also exclude files wherein, let's say I don't want to copy temporary files, or I don't want to copy audio files or video files or MP3 files and JPEG files and whatnot. So I can define a pattern for it. And then the transfer options is we by default it transfer only data that has changed, or you could select as transfer all data. Now, remember this, that for the first time when the data sync is ran, it is going to copy everything for the initial sync, and then post after that, every time the data sync task is run, it will only bring out or bring in the changes to your S3 bucket. So I'll just say transfer only data. I can also establish a verification mechanism where I can say verify all data, verify only transfer data, or don't verify the data at all. Now, depending on what options you select, your task could run a little bit longer than the standard or the usual time. So keep that in mind. So we're going to say verify only data transferred. I am going to utilize the bandwidth available, but I can throttle it. So if I uncheck, I can throttle the bandwidth. I can also, instruct the data sync task to keep deleted files. For example, you deleted certain files from the source, but then you want to keep those files in your target location within your S3 bucket. I will just say keep deleted files. If I uncheck, it's going to see that the source files are deleted. It's going to delete the file from S3 bucket also. Or let's say users are making changes in the real time, it can also overwrite the files. Then you can define a schedule. Right now I'm going to select not schedule, but you can define it as hourly, daily, weekly, and days of the week. If you click on custom, you would have to provide a cron expression or a rate expression. So depending on how you ever want to schedule the task will be on the basis of your use case. So I'm going to say not scheduled. And then you can also define a task report, which is an optional step wherein, it lasts for an S3 bucket where you want the data sync task. Once it finishes up, you want it to, let's say, get a summary report, or you would want to get a standard report and things like that. So I'm going to select none for now. You can also enable logging. So this is where, I was talking about previously administrators would create a script. If it fails, they would put in an error logic and things like that. But then with this logging, you can actually enable your logging using CloudWatch log group. So I'm going to just say log level as this, and then I can also say that do not generate logs. It's not going to create anything, but then I'll just select log basic information such as transfer errors. I'm going to select my log group. I'm going to hit next. This is the screen where you review everything, wherein it shows you the source location. So that's going to be my SMB. Then it gives you the destination location configuration, which is going to be an Amazon S3. And then it tells me the settings, as in the source data option that scan everything, and things like that. Your transfer options keep the deleted files, overwrite files, and things like that. And then I'll click on create task. It takes about 10 seconds for the task to be created. So I'll click on task and you'll see that I actually have this task listed right here. So all I would do is that, I can just select this and I can just say start with defaults. And that is how it will start the synchronization of your files from your on-prem system storage, on-prem storage to Amazon S3. If I take you to the S3 bucket, you would see that that bucket is empty and it'll take a couple of minutes for this bucket to be filled with data. And then you can also click on the task history and you'd be able to see that it's launching right now. So we'll click on it, it'll give you the status, it'll give you the error message. You can click on view logs in CloudWatch, wherein you can look for any errors that are being logged. It'll tell you how many files it has moved, what was the throughput, and things like that. Okay. Any questions that anyone has before we move on to the S3 file gateway while this is running? Okay. Nala,
Yeah,
any
no,
questions on the chat?
no questions on the chat as well. Yep.
Is there a way to move this? Okay, yeah, we can move this to here. Okay. All right, so the next we are going to talk about an S3 file gateway. I'm going to quickly take you to my deck just for a minute so that I can show you what step we are on. So we covered the application server, which is this number 1. Then we covered number 2. We haven't covered number 3. So we are going to talk about S3 transfer acceleration, and we are also going to talk about S3 file gateway next. All right. With that said, I am going to just go into my console. So let's first talk about the S3 transfer acceleration. So it is as easy as what you do is that you can get on to the S3 console, open up the bucket, click on the properties, and then if you scroll down, you would see an option called transfer acceleration. By default, this is disabled. So if I click on edit, it's going to be in a disabled state. I pre-staged it because it generally takes about um, 20 minutes or more to enable the transfer acceleration. So that is how you would go about doing the transfer acceleration. So that covers the step number 3. Any questions that anyone has on transfer acceleration? Okay. There are no questions. Another thing to note is that this can be enabled through AWS SDK or CLI, or it can even be automated and things like that. One of the useful links that you could utilize for an S3 bucket is this AWS owned portal, which is called the S3 Accelerate Speed Test. It basically what it does is that you need to provide your bucket name at the end on this link, and it's present. This link is present in the AWS documentation, but you need to provide the bucket name, you need to provide the region, and then once the Amazon S3 transfer acceleration is enabled on a bucket, just run this. It takes about 5 to 8 minutes, but it is going to show you if you would have used S3 direct upload, what is the speed for that? Or if you would have used an S3 accelerated transfer upload speed, how much it's going to be. So if you look at it, it is about 93% faster. So if I had to, let's say, upload a file right now using the S3 accelerated transfer upload speed, it's going to be about 93% faster than doing an S3 direct upload speed. And it gives you the details on different regions. So this comes in very handy, when you're working with the users, right? And specifically for this customer, AMD, since they have got a global presence, they basically leverage this to make sure that they are on point in terms of the speed that they should be getting, and, taking care of the latency for their files and things like. Okay. Now I'm going to just move this here. Now let's talk about step number
Gaurav,
4. Yes.
there is a question. Is there an ingress cost for the transfer acceleration?
No ingress cost. However, for the CloudFront itself, that is configured would be based on the amount of data. So there is certain limit on the data that is not charged or free. I don't know what that number is, but then post that, there is a charge for it. Okay. Any other questions, Mamala, on the chat?
None other questions. I was just quickly looking up the charges. It is 0.03, 0.04 cents per GB. So,
Yep. Yeah. All right. So the last step that this customer did was to configure an S3 file gateway. So the way you do that is that, when you get onto the uh, storage gateway page, it is going to give you this option to create the gateway. Now, as part of this demo, I already created it because it could take up to, 10 minutes or so. But the way you do this is that you click on create gateway, and then you define the gateway name, you define the time zone, and then the type of the gateway. So in our case, we are using Amazon S3 file gateway, but let's say you would have been using FSX file system, right? And you would want to cache the FSX file system. At that point of time, you should be utilizing Amazon FSX file gateway. Each of these gateway types have a specific function. In our demo, we are using Amazon S3 file gateway. Then it gives you the host platform. So depending on what your hypervisor model is, whether it is VMware ESXi or it's Hyper-V or it's an Linux-based KVM, you would be downloading the templates accordingly and set up the file gateway, the S3 file gateway. So if you look at it, another option that it comes in very handy is that what you could do is you could also click on this gateways and then click on.
Gaurav, are you presenting from the console? I see the thank you slide. Just wanted to check.
Oh, I know what might have happened. The Zoom Workplace just allows you to share for 30 minutes at max, because that's the message that I'm getting. Should I be like unsharing and sharing it again?
Yeah, can you try that real quick? Yeah.
Sure, give me a minute. Let me share my screen again. How about now?
Yep, all good.
Okay, all right, cool. So yeah, so like I was saying, you would have to select the gateway options, your platform options and things like that. And then you would confirm once the gateway is created. The second step for a gateway to be created is that you would have to activate that gateway, right? Once you activate the gateway, it's going to show up here. Then the last step is to create a file share, right? So a file share, when you click on create file share, you would have to define or choose your gateway. You could define the file share protocol, whether it is NFS or SMB. It is up to you, however you want to do it. NFS is supported on Windows also. So there's this notion that, NFS doesn't work well with Windows. It does. All you need is the NFS client on Windows. It's up to you, however you want to use it. So to select NFS, you select your S3 bucket, which is going to be the shared data sync, and then you can create a file share. You can also customize the configuration. So you can basically define audit logs, for example. You can also define your, connect S3 based on a prefix and whatnot. You can establish encryption and things like that. So for the purposes, the file share demo, the file share itself, when you create it, could take up to, again, 8 to 10 minutes to be created. So I already pre-staged everything. When you click on this share, what you will see is that it'll give you the commands down at the bottom on that you can leverage to connect to the file share. So if it's Linux, you use the sudo command. If it is Microsoft Windows, you could use mount. And if it's Mac OS, you would again use sudo. So this is the information that you can get out of this file share. If you click on actions, the other thing that you can also look at is that you can edit the file share access settings. So let's say if you are using, if you want this file share to be accessible from a particular IP range, you can define that. You can click on add client and you can define. So, in our case, we have got this customer has global presence. So, they're probably leveraging the access object feature of the file share. Another thing that comes in useful is to click on refresh cache. So if you refresh cache basically, Gateway automatically does that for you. But let's say, if you have a customer or you have customers across where they are saying that they're not able to see the refresh changes for the files that they've uploaded to S3, then you can basically click on refresh cache. It's going to give you a message that is going to begin the refresh process, and it finds the S3 object that have been added, remove, replace since the gateway last listed the bucket contents and cache results. Basically, it's going to just remove the objects that have not been shared, that have not been accessed for a while. It's going to remove it and it's going to start that. Now, the start process would depend on how big your cache is. In our case, I defined the cache volume to be 150 gigs. I think the maximum it can go up to is 16 terabytes. It's an EBS volume. And the way you see that is if you click on the gateway, you would be able to see it. You'd be able to see it in the EC2 instance. So if I go to EC2, I have this file gateway. I do have the storage tab, and then the first one is the root. However, this is my cached volume. Can you add an additional cache volume? You cannot add an additional cache volume. However, you can increase the size of this EBS volume, and then you would have to reconfigure it from the gateway. So you can absolutely do that. Taking you back to my RDP session, and what you'll see is that so this is a Windows machine. This was my shared folder called shared one. And then I also mapped the file share, the S3 file gateway share as a network location. And if I click on it, you will see that, right now I do not have anything. The reason is because it is still probably bringing everything to my S3 bucket through the data sync. So if I go to the data sync tab, well, it was success. So all I will need to now do is my files. Let's just check the files are there within the shared data sync.
So, Gaurav, when you have a logical stop, let me know. There is a question in the chat.
Sure. Yeah, just give me a minute. So you can see the data is there. The data sync actually copied all of this data to S3, and then you can also verify that through the execution status of the task that we ran. You can also click on view logs in CloudWatch, and that way you can actually establish notifications as well if there is an error or if there is it has been successful. The last thing that I want to do is that either you can wait for the S3 file gateway to refresh the cache for you or automatically, or you can just force it by clicking on file shares. You select this and then click on action and click on refresh cache and click on start. In a couple of minutes, what you would see is that I would start to see my folder. Well, it immediately brought everything here. So if you look at it, this data that you are seeing on this S drive is actually on S3, but then it is cached onto my local server. So that just makes it easy for people, the videographers, the editors to edit the files and do it in real time, right? You can also what you can do is that, let's say you don't want to use data sync, but then let's say there is a file that you want to copy to S3. So all I would have to do is just Control C, and then I'll just put that file onto my volume, the network location, which is my S3. And you would see that this file would automatically get synced asynchronously, though, would get synced to my S3 bucket. Vimala, we can stop. You can bring up the question.
Yeah, the question is, does moving to S3 change the way you approach disaster recovery?
Sorry, you were breaking up, Vimala.
Oh, the question is, moving to S3, would it change the approach to disaster recovery?
So it'll depend, right? So generally in an on-prem environment, right, if you have SAN or NAS, you're probably taking a backup of it and you might even have a secondary site. But then if you look at S3, S3 is a regional service which gives you about 99.99% of availability and about 11 nines of durability. So the chances of you losing data, basically what it equates to is that the chances of you losing data is going to be 11 nines of durability is one object per 10 million objects. What you could also do is that you can actually enable cross-region replication for your S3. If you have a disaster recovery region that you have established on AWS, you can also do that. The second thing that you can do is that you've got data sync in place, so you can deploy data sync agent that it could copy your data or objects from this S3 bucket in your primary region to a secondary S3 bucket. And that might also even have wherein you can enable your um, uh, S3 transfer acceleration. Okay, and then let me just refresh my S3 bucket. You should be able to see that PowerShell script right here. So with that, we could conclude the demo session. If there are any questions, please bring them on, or you can come off, off mute and then ask the questions. I'm going to stop sharing screen. Vimala, there are questions on the chat?
I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
But yeah, feel free to ask any questions as we conclude the session.
All right. And then I would also like to share, my link for filling out the survey. The surveys help us, talk about more topics that you would like to see in future. Malav, generally, do you bring that up on the chat?
Yeah, I do share the link in the chat. Yep. Yeah, everyone, so please fill out the survey. The first page has like the speaker information, and the second page has a specific area where you can put in any future topics that you would be interested in. And we'll definitely work to get those topics to this group. All right. I don't see any other questions, Gaurav. Any final questions? All right. Yeah, we'll also share the email the survey link via email as a follow-up. But thank you everyone for joining. And Gaurav, any final thoughts?
Nothing. I would just wanted to ask, I was hosting this for the first time. So we are recording this session. Would we be, and there was a question from one of the participants who could not join, by the way, was asking, he just texted me whether we'd be sharing this recording with the participants or people who signed up.
Yes, so this is something new that we are starting in the Orlando user group since we went virtual. One of our co-hosts who is unable to join today will take the recording. We are going to create some live sessions in future, but for now we'll have a YouTube channel and we'll upload this session into the YouTube channel and we'll share that with everyone.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
So I guess we are good to close the
Yes.
call.
Yep. Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining. Please keep an eye on future topics. We may bring in some generative AI topics for the close of this year, maybe mid-November or early December. So keep an eye out. And also, please fill out the survey. That's how we'll know the topics that are interested are of interest for this group. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Have a great evening. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.